Hello everyone, my name is Sanjay Kulkarni. I'm a research scholar at SSBM Geneva. My mentor is Professor Dr. Vijay Kumar Vardarajan, SSBM Geneva and University of New South Wales, Sydney. I'm here to present my concept paper, How to Shape AI Governance in B2C Marketing for Competitive Edge. Following is the brief agenda. Uh, Walk you through a quick background introduction. What are the core AI principles to formulate the AI governance framework? Motivation for the research. What is a preliminary literature review? What are the research questions? What are the benefits of AI governance framework? The research methodology planned to be adopted, and the conclusion, along with the references and bibliography. So, a brief background and introduction. I'm sure you've been flooded with marketing communication from various brands that seemed as though they seem to know you very well. They've been sharing you personal messages addressing to your name. Uh, they have been enticing you with various recommendations, recommending different items. It could be new products in terms of brands like Nike or Toyota, Burger King, or it could be travel destinations like tripadvisor.com or expedia.com. They could also be movies that you've been watching on either Netflix or Amazon Prime. They could, recommend you with the latest movies and most popular movies, and maybe movies of your interest. So they might also show you ads, offer unique codes and discount coupons to help you, better navigate and make a purchase. So all this might seem as though someone has read your mind. So ever did you ever wonder how do they do it and how you can do it too? The answer to this is artificial intelligence marketing. So if you see in terms of the overall market for artificial intelligence marketing products, that's been given by McKinsey. The artificial intelligence market, especially in marketing and sales, is to the tune of 1.4 to 2.6 trillion dollars in the coming years, for the 5 to 10 years. That is the projection from McKinsey. So quickly, to understand better how artificial intelligence is playing its role in the B2C marketing, what are the benefits and the risks involved. Increasingly, marketers are adopting AI/ML technologies, and this has resulted in tremendous benefits to consumers. Also, AI/ML technologies have been used by marketers to personalize offers, uh, give promotions with targeted campaigns from the rich consumer data collected. Apart from benefits, they are associated risks for using of AI/ML technologies, and that involves data privacy concerns, potential lack of transparency, manipulation of consumer behavior, the need to address algorithmic bias originating from human bias, which is ultimately in the data. So excessive power to big tech or a few handful of organizations, as we have seen, the likes of Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, they do collect a lot of data. Either it is cookies data or some of your browsing data. All of that leads to uh, excessive data collection and analysis by the big tech organizations, and their analysis will kind of the excessive power is held by these big tech companies. So effectively, what it means is, AI/ML technologies, they do not have a robust governance framework, and that is where it becomes important that the AI governance framework, especially for B2 marketers, at a detailed implementation level be crafted. So there are these privacy laws around today. Primarily, they deal with data, like the GDPR in the EU, the CCPA in California, PIPDA in Canada, and GPD in Brazil, and also PDPC in Singapore. All these, are there, and the laws and the regulations have been formulated to protect data privacy in these regions. So, what are the core principles for us to frame the AI governance framework? And the fundamental goal of AI system is to build AI products which are fair, which are transparent, ethical in manner, which would kind of earn consumer trust. Because we are talking about B2C marketers, and that involves various brands from various organizations. So first of all, in terms of fairness, fairness is a broad term. Ideally, it has to be fair, and it has to be unbiased. When I say unbiased, it could mean that we need not discriminate either by gender, race, ethnicity, or age, or it could be any other thing that could be harmful to society in general. So explainable AI, as in, you are able to, increasingly algorithms are playing a major role in decision making in the organization, and that is where explainability, comes into picture. So the ability to interpret these predictions made by the AI models, which can be properly explained, is of primary interest, and that's one of the core principles in the AI governance framework. Responsible AI, the practice of designing, the developing, deploying these AI systems, which are going to be fair to the human and as well as are on in line with societal benefits or consumer benefits, have to be designed by the responsible teams, and that is where responsible AI is one of the other core AI principle. When it comes to ethical AI, again, while all of these are interconnected, ethical AI specifically deals with fundamental values such as individual rights, privacy, non-discrimination, and non-manipulation. Accountable AI is in line with responsible AI, but at the same time, here specifically it points to the multiple stakeholders in the AI delivery life cycle. So in all together, the core AI principle, no doubt they are all related. They have their own flavors, which together lead to consumer trust. And the trust is described as AI that is lawful, ethical, and technically robust. So what is the motivation for this research? So as we have seen, there is increasing demand for AI governance framework, AI standards, regulatory policies, and legislation that need to be formed for AI systems. The current AI governance framework provide high-level regulatory policies, but they lack implementation details for B2C marketers. But otherwise, AI governance framework and standards do exist for AI in general. Uh, various global AI governance and standards initiatives have been taking shape and continue to be formulated by various countries, various regions, of which in UK, if you specifically look at it, right, there are no AI specific legislation, but they do cater and they need to adhere to the existing legal obligations that are applicable to UK business. Even in the EU, AI regulation prohibits any AI practices that pose risk to individuals. either manipulative, physical, or psychological harm. In the US, there is currently no federal regulation of AI. Regulators have sent a clear message that AI regulation is on the horizon. And as I said, big tech have kind of framed some of the governance framework. Academia has framed and have published AI standards. But again, for B2C marketers specifically, there needs to be framework which can be implemented by all the stakeholders along the lines of AI principles by various organizations. Even China and India do have specific laws, but specifically in China, the AI algorithms have been regulated, and the regulation is tough for businesses to adhere to. For India, there are no AI-specific laws. Niti Aayog has published a paper titled National Strategy for Artificial Intelligence, but we are yet to see any concrete steps in formulation of regulation as well as legislation as far as AI products and AI systems are concerned. So the preliminary literature review, as we know, I have been talking about. In EU, GDPR applies, which means that data is the underlying ingredient for all AI systems. So whatever applies to businesses in EU for GDPR, is applicable as far as is extensible to AI systems as well. So there is also ongoing research with focus on AI governance framework by academia, industry, and in the involvement of the government. The AI governance frameworks and standards, as I mentioned, are published by big techs, Microsoft, Google, IBM in general. But again, they need to be at a implementation level for the B2C marketers, which is missing. So the Interactive Advertising Bureau, which specifically is increasingly referred by the marketers, has published AI governance guidelines and use cases for the marketers. This needs to be used as a baseline to arrive at B2C AI governance framework. With consumer centricity increasingly taking shape, there is a gap that exists specifically to formulate AI governance for B2C marketers across industries. So what are the different research questions we are trying to answer by formulating through this topic, right? One is how to shape a comprehensive AI governance framework for the B2C marketers across industries. How do we address algorithmic bias, data bias, human bias, data privacy, fairness, and enable trust in brands in B2C marketing? How do we align each of the B2C marketing use cases to adhere to the core AI principles in decision making, from customer acquisition to customer engagement, for a rewarding customer experience? How to enable AI governance and AI standards to be adopted by stakeholders throughout the AI lifecycle, and that involves stakeholders from strategy, business, IT, AI practitioners, data analytics professionals, and as well as data scientists. So what are those different AI standards, process, and documentation that need to be followed in building AI systems for compliance and audit, involving internal, external stakeholders, and of course with the involvement of the government? So all of these questions are planned to be answered, and hence the goal of this paper is to shape AI governance in B2C marketing for competitive edge, is to provide the governance framework with practical implementation approach to build AI products and use cases which are in line with the AI principles of fairness, transparency, explainability, responsibility, ethical, accountable, and hence build consumer trust. So at a high level, following research methodology is planned to be adopted uh, through either conceptual, empirical, mixed and multi methods uh, to be planned, and it involves in three stages. The initial stage, where we are going to study existing AI governance framework standards, various marketing use cases, what are the data that is being used, and where is the gap. Assess various dimensions, risk factors associated with AI system in B2C marketing across industries. Then we would adapt a classification method to categorize these various marketing use cases. So in the second stage, we'll analyze, the models or the algorithms uh, that help in implementing these use cases for decision making. Not just the input side, but we will not also need to analyze the processing part, which is the algorithms, and we also need to analyze the outputs. That's the decision making output from these algorithms for each use case, and conduct a comprehensive review of current industry practices and gaps. So assessment of in current industry practice for AI infrastructure tools technology also play a major role, because that involves how do we uh, input the data, how do we process the data, and what outcomes we predict through the algorithms. So those technologies do matter, and then that's something which we will take it up as part of the second stage. In the final stage, we are going to arrive at a conceptual framework for the AI governance model with practical implementations for each use case. Stakeholders' roles and responsibility across AI lifecycle. Also, plan is to arrive at various checklists, documentation of impact assessment, arrive at AI standards, risks and process to be outlined. This is increasingly, to help consumers, regulators, and legislative bodies, including government, take their feedback. There's a bit of an iteration involved here at this stage, where this has to be exchanged, understood, discussed, agreed upon, debated, so that we arrive at a robust AI governance framework. So in conclusion, we see that AI governance framework and AI standards are at various stages. We could call it as preliminary stages, and there is an impetus to arrive at the framework and standards. Although various papers, articles, books, and publications have been published, but they have called out for a more collaborative approach in formulating AI governance framework and standards. The collaborative approach is required from the academia, industry, practitioners, AI practitioners, regulator, and legislative bodies, and of course, that involves government as well. So there is a need to plug this gap and provide holistic AI governance framework for the B2C marketers, provide implementation level guidelines throughout AI lifecycle, and also prepare the B2C marketers well in advance for oncoming regulatory policies, legislation, to help them avoid liabilities. Therefore, the need of the hour is that a robust AI governance framework in B2C marketing domain at an implementation is required. Various references have been referred to that involves a whole host of articles, websites, white papers, books, as well as research papers. Thanks for all the various authors who have taken initiatives, and that's of course setting the baseline for the new research work. Thank you.